Hello, welcome to the Matrix Podcast. I'm your host, Lynn Nakimera-Mahner. I am Ugandan American and a wife and mother. In this podcast, we dive into a young woman's journey to marriage and motherhood. In today's episode, we discuss that faith is the identity above all identities, about self-esteem and self-image, the true meaning of modesty, and not to mention the struggles of our day and age, the internet culture, and social pressures. Enjoy. Hello. Today we have a special guest and dear friend, like a sister to me, Katya. Welcome to the Matrix Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thank you for the very nice introduction. I am excited to be here.
Okay. I'll let you introduce yourself fully and we'll take it on from there.
Yeah, so I guess little introduction. My name's Katya Borger. I am 22 years old and I'm an entrepreneur working in the copywriting space. I'm a freelance long-form copywriter and LinkedIn ghostwriter. I am also, well, I should have probably mentioned this first and foremost. I'm a Catholic, and that is my main identity. And I guess that kind of sums me all up.
That's some cool stuff. Wow. So we'll get right into it. So the topic today is self-esteem, self-image, modesty, and the influence media has on us and culture. And you did mention in your introduction that you're Catholic, and I think a lot of us, with me included actually, growing up, I identified more with my cultural background. Even though I did grow up Catholic, I was always proud being a Catholic, but I never really, it was not my identity first. So can you explain why your Catholic identity comes first before anything else?
Yeah, so it's actually an interesting question because I recently wrote on my LinkedIn about how so many times we identify ourselves with very, very finite things. Like people ask you, well, let's take my introduction, for example. You asked me to introduce myself, and I introduce myself with my career, with my job, and I take those as pieces of my identity. But I think Catholicism is who we are. It's our main identity because it's eternal. And while things like cultural or ethnic identity are beautiful, they're God-given parts of who we are, I think our identity in Christ defines our purpose more because that's our values and, ultimately our home is with God. And I think even within Catholicism, the Catholic Church doesn't erase culture either.
Yes.
But when there are conflicts and when there is culture is ever changing, culture is ever evolving. Yes. And when there are conflicts within a culture, we ultimately are tied more to our Catholic values as opposed to our cultural identity.
Yes. Yes. Which is really interesting. I think a lot of challenge or conflict, struggle always brings out what is actually more important than anything. So I think for me, my Catholic identity has now become more the primary, and it's taken work for me to get there. It's so easy to get lost in everything else. Career, culture is great. It still comes from God anyways. But you really need to focus on the internal, as you said. To follow up with that, how has your faith influenced how you see yourself or your self-worth?
So, yeah, I love this question because I feel like Catholicism maybe gets some hate specifically towards women because, women can't be priests, and we hear about that all the time, and, well, from non-Catholics, that is. And so I think a lot of people see it as oppressive towards women, but what I think is really remarkable about the Catholic faith is that Catholicism is the first and only religion that has really ever given women a place in this world, a true sense of belonging. And so I feel like my faith has influenced my self-worth by showing me that I'm not alone in this journey, I guess, because there's so many powerful examples out there. Our Blessed Mother, for starters, and then we have these amazing women like Saint Joan of Arc and Saint Dymphna and all of these incredible saints who took down leaders who went up against the powerful rulers of their time, and even if it was just small scale changes, all of these women are so amazing. They'd have achieved so much. So who is a better role model, and what influences you better than seeing these women
Yes.
and reading about their lives?
Is there a particular one that you identify with, or stands out to you, or you kind of follow through as you go through your own life?
I would say there are several saints that I really pick up aspects of their life and like to emulate them. Saint Dymphna I mentioned specifically because she is a very prominent figure in my life. She's the patron saint of mental health, and with having a brother with epilepsy, obviously she is I hold a strong devotion to her. And so I think different saints, different powerful women of history play a part in my life and who I want to see myself as.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So you did mention the Catholic faith giving women power, to do their role in a really powerful way. I think we do underestimate in so many ways. However, like in contrast with that, I think there's an element of maybe it's more cultural that women are always yes, or expected to always say yes to whatever they're requested to do, or some task or whatever it may be. And I've also seen this with myself, saying yes or always apologizing for no reason. What specific habits for yourself or you have seen with other people, maybe people you look up to, that they've taken to break these habits of just being a yes person? At least from my experience, I think saying yes is so expensive. It's such a big thing because it's going to take energy, time away from you. So I think yeses should be limited.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think for me personally, it is something that I struggle with or have found myself struggling with, is the drive to say yes. And I think that comes from a fear of disappointment or of disappointing others. And I don't know if I don't know if it's that for me personally, or if it is just more of a feminine habit to like fear disappointing others. And so I think what has helped me the most, and what I would encourage people who are in the endless cycle of yeses and apologizing, is just start with pausing before you say yes. Just like take a breath and think, do I actually want to do this, or am I just afraid of disappointing others? I think that your yes should be rare, which will make it more meaningful. Like, I'm not saying never say yes, but I'm saying if you're saying yes to everything, your value is decreasing. When you're saying yes to something you can commit to, and you can do well, or you can help out in that way, I think that you are going to be able to help, and you're going to be able to achieve this yes in a more powerful way, as opposed to being extremely thinly stretched and trying to balance a bunch of things, and then you end up having your yes lose its value. So I feel like yeses and apologizing should be replaced with patience and with thanking people. So instead of saying I'm sorry, I can't say thank you for your patience, or I appreciate your understanding with the fact that. And I think that would make your yes stand out in a greater way, and it would make it more valuable.
Wow, that was well said. Um, I guess to follow up with that, um, how do you balance between the yeses where it's more of a challenge that I maybe you need to do versus the important yes, the yeses that you want to like you can do that you've thought about versus one that's you're unsure but it's a good challenge for you. I don't know
Ye-
if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think that there's definitely two different kinds of yeses and commitments out there. There are the ones where you have to perhaps die to yourself a little bit in order to achieve this thing that you know will help a lot of other people. For example, giving up your Saturday to help your mom because she has been overworked or something to in that regard. It's not like you really love to say yes and you don't really want to, but you know that you sacrificing that time is going to help your mom really be more energized the following weeks or give her the break she really needs. So I think that there is a difference between the two as opposed to you being asked to do a favor for someone else. So I think yeses within families are oftentimes a little bit different than yeses in work commitments and in the world. Not always, but they are different sometimes. So I think it is more of the I think you need to look at your commitments as am I doing this because I feel pressure and I feel guilty if I don't? Or am I doing this out of love and commitment for this person? And I think that that's a really good way to balance it is like look inwards and say, what am I going to feel when I've achieved this? After I helped my mom, after I gave up my Saturday helping my mom, I felt a sense of happiness and joy that I was able to give time back to her. And if I spent my Saturday doing something I really just didn't want to help with, or I didn't have the time to commit to, how am I feeling after it? Am I feeling upset and disappointed that I wasted a ton of time, or how am I feeling? So I think it is something that you have to look ahead at and say, how will I feel when I'm done with this?
Wow, thank you. The yeses, I think the thing you said that stood out for me was the yeses within your close family versus the outside. And as you said, the effects it's going to have on you moving forward. Because it always plays out in the long term, even though we don't really think about it that way. But thank you for elaborating. So, moving on to the media influence, the culture influence, especially here in the US, given how women are often sexualized in the images, how can a young woman protect and honor her self-image? And I know this is probably one of the biggest struggles of our time right now.
Yeah, so I feel like this one comes largely from a view of I think this one comes largely from how you view yourself. So we ultimately should view ourselves with respect because when you have respect for yourself in your dress and in conversation and in appearance, others will be automatically more respectful towards you. And I think it's really big in our culture where I see I see women particularly that are either they look like they just rolled out of bed, didn't do anything to help their appearance at all. And I think, you should have respect for yourself to perhaps put in a little bit more effort. Obviously, I'm not going to judge everyone because I don't know what everyone's story is, what their past is. But I do think self-respect is huge. And I think, like, ladies, we're not dressing for anyone other than ourselves. And obviously, in regards to how we would like to be presented in front of God, as a Catholic, I should say. But I think that when you have that true respect for yourself, the protection of your image is going to come naturally with that, because it is going to put up a barrier. It's going to put up a guard with how you're speaking and presenting yourself, and other people are going to see this invisible line that they are not able to cross. I like to take an example of oftentimes when I'm in public and I will be modestly dressed or maybe wearing a pretty dress or something like that, men are 9 out of 10 times more likely to hold the door for me and to let me walk in front of them and all of that stuff. And as opposed to when I'm dressed perhaps a little bit, when I don't put up any effort and I just don't really care, I do not get that same treatment. Like, I don't get the respect from others like that. And I think that that is a tell a little bit of treat yourself with respect and others will follow suit.
With, let me say, young woman in question, or an example, grew up in a culture where in church you dressed as modest as possible because that's the house of God. But when they went out to hang out with friends, or for example the beach, I think for me is one interesting example I always go to. People are often in bikinis, correct? And this includes us Catholics. So I always question, if we do dress modestly in church and then in different areas, for example, going to the beach, hanging out with friends, going to have fun, you dress a certain way. Am I just dressing because everyone at the beach dresses this way? Or modesty really should be uniform wherever. You should be consistent. So that's the one thing I struggle with a lot, because it's, for example, specifically the beach, as I said, people dress however, but then we go to church and be modest. So my question is that okay? Because the beach is okay to dress less.
Yeah. So I think that this is really interesting, actually, because the definition of modesty is behavior, manner, or appearance intended to avoid impropriety or indecency. So I think that a lot of people will take the definition of modesty and they'll say always be clothed from the neck to the ankles, right? And I think that that's not the definition. That is not the definition of modesty. Look it up in a dictionary. So if I'm going to the beach and I am wearing a turtleneck sweater and a long skirt, I am not dressed modestly for the beach. I am dressed covered, but I'm not dressed for
The
activity that I am taking part in. Thank you. Yes. So I think that it is a sense of, I don't know how far I want to push this, but I would say it is a sense of immodesty to dress at the beach in something that you wouldn't wear to the beach. Because while it is still important to be covered, I'm not endorsing bikinis and that kind of stuff. I'm saying, hold on to that respect for your body. We are temples of the Holy Ghost. Hold on to that. But modesty plays way more into, I'm going to wear this to church and I'm going to wear the same exact thing to the beach, because I'm not wearing heels to the beach. And I'm not wearing heels to play volleyball and that kind of stuff. I'm going to dress for the activity because that is the best way for me to remain modest.
Interesting. Is modesty only for the person trying to practice it, or does it actually affect everyone else around you? You think?
I think ultimately women's modesty is, so modesty in women is not emphasized because women are a problem and because our bodies are a problem, but more so because we represent something profoundly sacred. The Catholic Church honors feminine bodies as life-bearing, beautiful, powerful, and sacred, which is meant, and as Catholics know, but many non-Catholics wouldn't know, or perhaps many Catholics also don't know this, is sacred objects in the Catholic Church are veiled, such as the tabernacle. And in the traditional Latin Mass, in the traditional liturgy, you will also see many women veiling their heads. And that is for the same reason. It's because women and the abilities for us to be co-creators with God, that's sacred, and it's meant to be veiled and protected and handled with intention. And I think that modesty, it isn't for the woman, it's not for the men. It's about dignity. It's about dignity in who you are and the values we want to uphold.
Wow. I'm kind of taking notes on that one.
Yeah, so I kind of just went a little bit stray with that one. I don't even know if I held on to your original question, but
I think you answered it in a more profound way than I expected, because my mentality is you're not just preserving your body just for yourself. It does affect other people, like how you dress. For example, like as you did make a point about, it's not just about veiling and conserving to protect like men's minds, for example. It's about dignity. It's also about your relationship with God. As you dress, we're part of the body of Christ. And how are you dressing yourself? As someone who, as a being that belongs to God.
yeah.
So it's deeper than just affecting people's minds in a negative way. It's more sacred than people think it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's taken very lightly in that regard. Following up on that, how can a young woman who struggles to be modest, like if I was just used to wearing my short skirt dress because it looks cute and that's kind of how I've been doing things, what strategies can I take to resist that pressure to dress a certain way that's not particularly modest? I think sometimes it's pressure because of the trends that are going on, but sometimes it's someone may feel it's more expressing themselves. What steps can that young woman take to help herself be more modest?
Yeah.
Especially if you're a young woman looking into like eventually getting married, or even you're already married, but it's still a struggle for you.
So I think it all starts with knowing your worth and how you want others to treat you based on your worth. And I think a really common denominator throughout our entire conversation has been the value of respect of yourself. So when a young woman is clear on who she is, she's less likely to bend to every trend and standard that's thrown her way. But one thing to remember is that it's perfectly okay to follow fashion trends. I do, just not all of them, because some of them are ugly and some of them are just wildly inappropriate. And I think that when you surround yourself with people and content that remind you about the value of your appearance, I think everything else will follow suit. I understand the pressure to try and fit in and to wear what everyone else is wearing, and that's fine, and it's fine to fit in, and it's fine to wear what everyone else is wearing to a degree, because I think that there is a certain degree of, for example, last year, a really common trend that I saw everywhere were these like Amish girl dresses, like the prairie dresses. And it's like, yeah, those are really cute and I'll totally follow that trend. But with the whole like knit bikini trends of this year, I'm like, nope, that's a trend I'm not going to follow, but also because I don't really think it's that cute. And I think kind of forming your decisions in that way, it's totally fine. Follow the trends that you feel align with your values, that uphold your worth, and that treat your body with respect. And I think that who you are with, I touched on this earlier, who you are with and who you are following also bear a huge influence on this. Because I think along with knowing your worth, you need to know who is worth your time. Because a lot of people will drag you farther away from what you see as valuable. And some people will bring you closer to it.
That's a huge point you hit there. And I think sometimes it's such a big struggle for if you grew up with, for example, maybe a mom, a sister who doesn't necessarily dress modest, and that's kind of been the norm for you. That's been the example. So how being able to form your own dignity, I think, can be a struggle in that regard. The conditioning that you've had home often affects. It's crazy to think about because a lot of times we're just focused on mindset and intellect, but it goes down to things like how you choose what to wear.
Yeah.
And I know everyone's different, but what you just said, the people you surround yourself with and what you see over time growing up is often what you adapt to dress yourself. So
And I think if I can bring up just one more point,
yes.
I think so obviously modesty in a traditional Catholic household is a huge emphasis. And I remember growing up and it was a huge emphasis in the home I grew up in, which actually made me want the opposite. I didn't want to dress modestly because I was under the impression that I'm dressing modestly to protect men from themselves. And I thought, why is that on me? Why isn't it on them? And so I think there was a time where I would wear whatever I want because I could. And I think that was also a time in my life where I feel like I didn't have, again, the best influences around me, but also I didn't have the best idea of who I want to become. And I think when you know who you want to be, when you know whose you are, or ultimately belong to our Lord, and when you think about how you want to be perceived, I think that is huge. That plays a lot into modesty. I just a little side note. So
Yeah.
when I was starting my whole more modesty journey, I really loved the old money aesthetic. I think it just looked awesome. And so I would follow like a lot of Audrey Hepburn's looks and stuff like that. And so she's like so iconic, right? But like at the same time she's so feminine and most of what she wore was very fashionable with the time but also very modest for our time. And it's like, so if you find somebody who's just like stunning like Audrey Hepburn and you want to emulate that style, go for it. Like that's a really fun way to just make yourself very unique in who you are and how you dress as well. So expression with fashion is still very much there in a modest sense. Also, like just with that being said, I had a layover in Istanbul, Turkey, a couple years ago, and the Muslim women, very, very modest, most of them wearing hijabs and everything, were some of the most fashionable ladies I have ever seen in my life. I mean, the airport was so bougie, but the women there were stunning. They were dressed to the nines, and nobody can tell us that modest women cannot dress really, really beautifully, really fashionably, and not see the Muslim women in Istanbul that I saw. So I think that's a big thing as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, just side note, Turkey has amazing fashion. Like, it's just out of this world, in my opinion. I just kind of want to dig deeper on this because as you said, you kind of looked for people to look up to and emulate them. With someone who struggles with confidence, self-esteem, or maybe has been in an abusive environment, for example, often you want to go wild, unruly, go do whatever you want. How can that young woman slowly get back on track? Because even though you do look for someone you can emulate, I think it can take time. Like for this specific kind of woman who's struggling with self-esteem, they're not confident about themselves. They're kind of lost.
Um, oh, that is a good question. I would say, well, okay, so my question back for you is
Yeah.
this in the sense of more of self-esteem based, more modesty based? Where are you taking this from?
I would say more self-esteem
Okay.
and maybe self-image as well. I think they kind of go hand in hand.
So I would say a healthy self-esteem is the foundation for everything, and it's how we show up in relationships, it's how we pursue goals and how we respond to setbacks. And I think the setbacks are really important because when a young lady in this scenario that you are describing is experiencing a setback and she's trying to get back to where she wants to be, or maybe she's trying to get to where she wants to be and was never there. And when you know your worth and when you are trying to build self-esteem, don't settle. Don't settle for people, for jobs, for a version of yourself that isn't true. It helps when you are communicating clearly, when you have people that you can look up to, you have mentors, or perhaps that isn't an option in your life. Perhaps you don't have those people in your life. And in that case, it's really important to set boundaries with the people that are perhaps keeping you held back. Boundaries are huge. And I think from there, from the point where you are setting boundaries, or from the point where you are getting those mentors, getting those important people in your life who are going to guide you along, go after what matters to you with confidence. Don't settle. Go with confidence and achieve what you want to achieve.
Do you think going to God could be a solution? Do you think there is a bit of underuse of prayer, or just spending time with God in adoration, for example, or going to church in general? And I know it varies with people, that you need mentors. I think that's very important. You need someone who's kind of in the same journey with you to have an example, or emulate. I just think sometimes there's a lack of prayer, or we do not use that gift to the fullest, and
Yeah.
it's very powerful. Would you want to elaborate on that?
Oh my goodness, yeah, 100%. I think that prayer heals so much. Some of the most broken times in my life, I spent so much time sitting in front of the Blessed Sacrament of Adoration, just bawling my eyes out on the pews. And I think that God hears those cries and He hears those prayers. And when you are going at this from a prayerful point of view, He will answer absolutely anything. I can't remember which saint said this, or perhaps it was in the Bible, actually. If you, yeah, it's got to have been in the Bible. If you ask anything in the name of the Lord, it will be granted to you.
Yeah.
And that is so true. It's been tried and true in my life. And I think God is just waiting for people to ask things of Him.
Yeah.
He wants to give you what you need. And I think if you are broken, if you're hurting, pray, go to church, go to confession, really spend that time with God. Get a spiritual director. Spiritual directors
Yes.
are huge. And I think that that's invaluable. I mean, if one thing is going to heal you from anything you're going through, it's going to be reinforcing a relationship with our Lord.
Yeah. I think for me that's a work in progress, honestly. With me in that regard, like to just share about myself, I'm someone who, when I'm struggling, and this doesn't necessarily have to be about our topic of esteem. I often, it really helps me to talk to someone because it helps me see things differently, or they're kind of like a mirror, and you're able to see things you're not seeing for yourself because you're in the frame. But I know that even I to some level, I need to pray more. I need to go to church more and spend time with God. And as a busy first-time mom, sometimes it's not possible. But you can pray in your own home. You can say the rosary. There's so much we can do. But I think oftentimes we're just in our heads. Oh, as you mentioned, mentors. We don't have those people who could be guiding us to that direction. I think prayer should be the primary thing, and the other parts of it, like spiritual direction, your mentors, your family, are more supplementary. And it depends on the situation, but I think at the end of the day, even when you get spiritual direction, your relationship with God is the ultimate thing that gets you to where you need to be.
Yeah. And 100%, and just like playing off of that a little bit.
Yeah.
So prayer is huge, but prayer doesn't have to be huge. Like, you don't have to commit to saying the rosary every single day, because for a lot of people, for a lot of moms, that's simply not possible. You don't have time for that. So even something as simple as washing the dishes, you can offer as a prayer to God, and cleaning the house, taking care of baby. There's just so many areas of your life that could be offered as a prayer if you offer it as a prayer. And I think that that's like the remarkable thing about God, is he doesn't structure anything. He's not like, say one rosary a day and it'll be fine. He just says, call upon me and I'll help you.
Wow, that's an amazing point, actually. Like I've used that maybe once, but I've never thought about it the way you just explained. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. Taking mental notes. um, so we mentioned about self-esteem and how crucial it's like a foundation of your being to some extent. And why is that very important for relationships, and achieving personal goals, could be more secondary, but I think the main point here is relationships. Would you want me to repeat that?
I'm so sorry. Did I spaced out? Did you ask a
No, it's
question?
fine. It's fine. I can redo that.
Okay.
Why is healthy self-esteem important for relationships and achieving personal goals, or whatever you want to achieve?
So I think that a high self-esteem is important for achieving personal goals, because you will, when you have a high self-esteem. Okay, so actually, first of all, I'm going to break this up a little bit. I think that in some cases, self-esteem can be too high. You can think too much of yourself, and that is
Yes.
going to hinder you from a lot of your goals that you have. And I think you have to be cautious about that. But I think having a healthy form of self-esteem, because very often self-esteem is too low as well. So having that middle ground is going to be extremely important, because that's going to help you communicate, and it's going to help you truly understand what you need. If you have a soaring self-esteem, if it's way too high, you're going to think that you need way more than you truly need. And if it's too low, you're going to shoot too low. So really aiming for like a healthy boundary is going to take, with the decisions you make in the future, with your goals and ambitions, it's going to take it from a very central point of view as well. And I think fostering that is going to be really important in regards to long-term success.
Is there an example you can share how where you are with your self-esteem or self-worth? how that has helped you in your relationships, um, or you've been able to see areas that you need to improve upon.
Um, so I think like a really good example. I don't know if this is like exactly what we're looking for, but an example recently, where it comes to self-esteem, particularly in regards to my relationships, um, is in my wedding planning phase. I have been looking at a lot of venues, and I am obsessed with the very classy, very timeless vibes of venues. And I found a venue that was pretty much perfect, and there was almost no red flags about it. But then I found one that was way better, and it looked so cool, and it would make me feel so cool to have my reception there. But it was several $1,000s more expensive. So I think that having I think that this plays into confidence and self-esteem and respect and everything. It's like having respect enough for myself to say I'm doing this, I'm planning my reception to have this time to spend with my new husband and with everybody who loves me, wants to celebrate with me. I don't need to waste several $1,000s to make myself look better because people love me and they're coming because they love me. And we can do the perfect reception area that has almost nothing wrong with it. It's just not as good as the other one. We can go with this one because I love it just the same. And I think I think especially when it comes to confidence and the value of self-respect, it's like I am not necessarily, I don't necessarily feel the need to overcompensate with better things and make myself look cooler and all this stuff. At least not in this regard. I mean, nobody's perfect. I do fall into that quite often. But I guess that's like a little example of where it played a big role in my life recently.
That's huge though. Like, you know, with me I'm almost married 2 years now, coming up. Um, when you look back at the wedding expenses, you're like, wow, that was a waste of money.
Yeah.
Like it is, it's so I'm glad you're able to see this, and like as you said, you may not think it's too much self-esteem. It's actually it really is about yourself, like how you feel about yourself, your worth. Like as you said, like if you think you're way worth than you think you should be, you're gonna overshoot and overdo yourself, and you're probably going to spend more than you should be. So it's I say seeking God to find balance. um,
I
I
love
think
that.
that's where it is. So this is more cultural. I think our culture nowadays has affected our self-esteem, our worth, and it's oftentimes measured by career success, possession, materialism, social status. I mean, there's so many factors to mention a few. But we all know that there is truth and there is whatever is being pushed out in society. Um, how how do you work around our culture and all these pressures? And I think both of us are experiencing these things currently. We're all we're both in our foundational years. Um, how have you overcome, or how are you working on overcoming these pressures?
So I think for me personally, I have a fear of rejection, and it's quite prominent in my life. And so am, I always want to fit in and I always want to be liked. And I I very often would prefer to do what everyone else is doing rather than do my own thing. But then we have a culture that tells us to love ourselves. And then at the same time, it hands us a checklist of career, status, looks, wealth, followers, all of this stuff that makes us not love ourselves. And I think that it's self-worth is really all the pressures from the social status and the career and all of this stuff is such a contradiction to what we are ultimately meant to be. And frankly, it's a distraction as well. I believe it was St. Catherine of Siena said, be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire. And that is such a powerful phrase, because how many times are we looking at our career success and our new haircut and our, like, all of this stuff.
Vanity.
And yes, well, it does, it boils down a lot to vanity. But how many times are we looking at this stuff and we are completely losing track of who God wants us to be?
Right.
And I think when we root our identity in something deeper, like our inherent dignity as children of God, I think we stop chasing what society's telling us we need. I guess if that answers your question, I'm not really sure if I got it.
It does. It's such a paradox, a contradiction, and I think specifically for women, we're basically told we can have everything, or we can do as men can. You can have success. You could basically be a doctor and be a mom and be high up there, and it's like, it's not actually possible. It's often not possible. You kind of have to sacrifice one for the other to do well. Like, especially motherhood. You're on your journey to marriage, and some of these things kind of make sense as you're in marriage, long, years into marriage. When you mentioned that we often have to go back to God to find ourselves, we have so many distractions that if you do not make time for introspection, I think, in my opinion, I think it should be daily, because the day goes by and so much happens in just a day. And if you do not introspect, you lose yourself. We thank God we have a chance to start fresh the next day. But I think what it comes down to is, as you said, you really have to make time for God to find yourself, so that you don't lose yourself in the world. Because I think oftentimes, even I experience this. Like, I always wanted career success, and I knew I wanted a family, but I very well know I couldn't be a doctor and be a mom. Like, for me to be a good mom, it's not possible for me to be a doctor at the same time. And it's a struggle, frankly speaking. It's not easy to do these things, but you need to remind yourself where you're heading to, then work backwards. What should my priorities be? And we shouldn't target too much the short-term wins, because the long-term is huge. Like, I could be whatever I want to be now and hold off, I could get married when I'm 30 and all this stuff, but we all know that as women, biologically, we have a clock. We don't have those years go by really quickly. So, just kind of like wrapping up your point, surrounding yourself with people who emulate what you need to be. Going to God very often, and as you said, there's so many ways you can do that, so that you're not getting lost in all these things. And eventually, you will find your priorities if you're looking in the right place. If you're working towards the truth, you will find your way. It takes a lot, and that's why God is here. That's why we have him, to get through these struggles and our pressures of our times. But yeah, thank you for sharing all that. And lastly, you did hint on this earlier, but what boundaries have you set for yourself in your day-to-day to protect your mind and just like your overall well-being? And this is breaking down into spiritual, mental, physical even. So one example for me I can share is I often have seasons where I just get off the media. I just delete the apps and I'm off of them, and it feels like nothing happened. And I question, why do I even need these things, you know? So that's just my example. I'll let you share yours.
Yeah, so I think that that actually hit the nail on the head. I have times when I'm better and worse at it, but I almost never have social media on my phone. With that being said, for the sake of honesty, I will say I do have Instagram on my phone right now. Um, but I and it's only ever Instagram on my phone anymore. I've gotten off of all of the other ones, Snapchat, Facebook, all of these. I'm sure I still have my account somewhere, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely not active. But so I think that limiting social media has been a really, really, really powerful thing in my life. But at the same time, what I will say is I have curated a side of Instagram where I am mostly watching the videos of these homemakers and sourdough makers and all of these amazing people who are doing what I hope to achieve really well in the future. So I think that on one hand, social media is a powerful tool nowadays because you are able to get all of this advice and information. But on the other hand, like if I'm watching too much of these really incredible women like absolutely slaying their day-to-day life, then like at some point I'm going to be like, "Oh gosh, I am actually feeling worse about myself because what am I doing on my phone and not pursuing this life?" Um so I think that social media is one of the biggest boundaries to set with yourself. And then I think as far as I know you mentioned specifically religious boundaries as well. I can't exactly remember, but I think setting a in the scope of Catholicism, setting a routine has been really important for me. I am more of a routine oriented person though. I know some people are way better doing things off the cuff, but I'm like on XYZ days, I'll go to mass. Here's my prayer book. Here are the prayers I say in it, and it's like having a really regimented routine has been really important for me as well because it helps me make sure that I'm starting my day and ending my day with the most important things. And that definitely sets the tone for a good day.
Right.
And also just taking time. Don't be a loner. I work remotely, so it's too easy to be a loner. But take time to spend time with friends, to reach out with people. I think that that's super invaluable, especially you never know when people need you to reach out to them as well. So you might be as lonely as they are at the time when you reach out. And that's going to be really great for both of you. So I guess that would be the main practices that I do to really try and keep the influences of the negative influences of the outside world low in my life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're big, and I remember a tangent on this one. Very interesting. Um, this was probably about COVID time. I remember like kind of like I had gotten into a habit of tracking my Instagram followers. I'm like, what? Lynn, we have better things to do, and it was like getting to my head, and I couldn't believe I was doing this. I was surprised myself doing such things, and I realized this is how the media like really gets to your head. This is kind of like the other side of just going crazy about followers. And there's like, I don't know if you probably know this, but there's an app for unfollowers, so you're able to see people who you follow that do not follow you.
Yeah.
And I was hurt by some of the people. I'm like, wow, really? I really kind of took you as a friend, and I was offended. But like the big picture is like it was really affecting my mental health. Something that trivial. So I realized I really need to intentionally set my boundaries, and in the long run, all these things really do not matter. They're really nothing. Like they're such a small blip of your life. There's just so much more you should be doing. And like some of the things I've instilled now in that time of scrolling, like I'm trying to read more. For example, motivational books or books about marriage or homemaking, as you are as well. So it's all about balance. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I feel like you definitely encompassed everything well, but 2020 was a weird time for everybody, so.
Yes, it was tough. It
Yeah.
was tough. Anyways, thank you so much for making the time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom. I learned. I was here taking some notes. Um, it was lovely having you at the pod. Thank
Yes,
you.
you bet. I really enjoyed this. This was a very relaxing conversation to have. It was very enjoyable.
Nice.
Thank you so much.
Nice. Nice. I hope I took away some loneliness.
Oh, totally.
Possibly.
Totally. You broke up the Monday a little bit. Love that.